Hi, my name's Cheryl. I paid for a family reunion I wasn't even allowed to attend. They changed the date without telling me. Then my sister sent a message. Don't come. Well, bring you leftovers. She laughed. The whole family showed up. Without me. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part? They used my money, erased my name, and acted like I never existed. Have you ever realized too late that your family didn't forget you, they planned around you? Because that morning, I found out they all knew. I shut my laptop with a little more force than necessary. The office had thinned out for the day, and the hallway lights dimmed slightly as motion sensors stopped detecting anyone. I glanced at the clock, 6:37 p.m. It was the kind of hour where Texas skies deepened fast, slipping into that blue-gray stretch before dinner. I checked my phone again, instinctively refreshing the family group chat. Still quiet. Too quiet. Usually, by this point, Cressida would have sent some prep check photo her hairstyled, decorations half done, something curated. But nothing. 2 days out from the reunion. It fronted the cost for the Ridgewood rental weeks ago for $4,800, straight from my checking account. Sent it to Cressida with a simple message. Handled. Let me know if you need more. She just replied with a heart emoji. That was our usual rhythmy wiring money, her getting the spotlight. But now that silence didn't sit right. Something poked at me. I opened the calendar invite on my phone. Family Legacy Weekend, November 10th, Friday confirmed. I clicked into the booking confirmation from Ridgewood, same date. And yet, something felt misaligned. It wasn't until a random Facebook tag pinged my notifications that I spotted a post from my cousin May. Thursday night dinner kickoff. So excited to see everyone tomorrow. Tomorrow? My stomach dropped. I messaged her immediately. Wait, did the event move to Thursday? I thought it was Friday. She left it on read. Scrolling through the chat history, I saw it. Buried 3 weeks ago in a message from Cressida to a smaller group thread I apparently wasn't in. Final date, Thursday night, resort needs earlier start. But in the main group, nothing. No updates. My messages, can't wait to see you all Friday. Not a single soul corrected me. And then came the text. Cressida, in her usual tone that masked daggers with exclamation points. Don't come. We'll bring you leftovers. It's better that way. No explanation, no apology. Just that. I stared at it longer than I care to admit. That damned wink. It said everything she didn't feel like saying aloud. You're not welcome. You were never really part of this. You paid. That's enough. I didn't respond. What could I say that wouldn't sound small or defensive? I screenshotted it. Forwarded it to my work email. Sat in the silence of my one-bedroom apartment where no one had ever asked to hang a family photo. My first instinct was denial. Maybe she was joking. Maybe it'd missed a bigger plan. But it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like strategy. Like a family who wanted the money without the presents, the help without the reminder of who made it happen. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water I didn't drink, then walked back and opened my laptop again. I pulled up the receipt from Ridgewood. My name, Cheryl Gellhorn, stamped in bold. The one who secured the weekend, the menu, the floral deposits. All of it. Mine. Yet I wasn't invited to stand inside the place I built. How many times had I been the buffer? The one who made the family look put together from a distance? Birthdays, anniversaries, emergencies, they all had my name in the fine print, and never once in the headline. When did I become so convenient they forgot I was still a person? The anger didn't come in a roar. It came like a tide, steady and quiet, wrapping around my ankles and pulling me towards something colder. I didn't call her. I didn't call anyone. I didn't rage post or send a furious voice memo. Instead, I opened a folder on my desktop. I named it They Knew. Inside it, I dropped the screenshot. Then the Ridgewood receipt. Then the email where she accepted the funds. I knew what it looked like, obsessive, maybe. But when you're erased often enough, you start building proof that you existed. I thought of the phrase my mother once used on me, years ago, after I questioned why Cressida never paid me back for a 6-month rent spot. Let it go. Don't keep score. We're family. And maybe that was the problem. I hadn't been keeping score, I'd been keeping records. That night, I ate cereal straight from the box. No appetite. I reread her message once more before turning off the lights. They didn't just forget me. They planned around me. That night, I didn't sleep. I drafted a letter that made silence into a sound they couldn't ignore. The first file I labeled was proof of payment. The second, pattern of disrespect. I woke up still in yesterday's clothes. The room smelled like untouched tea and stale air. The message from Cressida sat like a splinter in my brain, blunt, casual, coded in condescension. I didn't open my phone right away. I opened my laptop. The They Knew folder stared back at me, newly created, nearly empty. I clicked into it and dragged over the receipt from Ridgewood. Proof. Then another ping-on email notification from Ridgewood's concierge, thanking Ms. Morell for coordinating the event. I exhaled through my nose, not even surprised. It was always Cressida who got the headline. Out of reflex, I tapped into the family group chat. It was gone. Vanished from my list. For a second, I thought it was a glitch. Then I scrolled through my archived messages. Nothing. I typed in family legacy. No matches. I had been removed. I opened Instagram. My hands shook, just slightly, when I searched Cressida's handle. Her stories were still active. I tapped the first bubble. There they were. Everyone. The Ridgewood event space glowing with fairy lights and white linens. A long table sat under strings of hanging bulbs, wine glasses reflecting soft gold. People I knew, people I had paid for, smiling like nothing was wrong. Then the camera panned across a banner above the dessert table. Thank you, Cressida. My name wasn't anywhere. Not even on a guest list. It didn't hurt, it scorched. The next story was worse. A reel, polished with background music and filters, flipping through old family photos. One picture me, at maybe 6 years old, with front teeth missing and cake on my cheek, was warped with a cartoon lens and a caption. She funded the vibe, but couldn't make the cut. The laugh-crying emoji broke me more than the words did. The view count climbed in real time as I watched. Then came the comments. So classy, Cressida. Family first. This setup is Pinterest perfect buried between the praise, was one from my dad's coworker's wife. Wait, where's Cheryl? A reply followed almost instantly. Long story, I didn't react. Not aloud. I just leaned back on the couch and stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the report button. I didn't click it. Let them have their curated memory. Let them have the narrative. Because this time, I had the receipts. I remembered another moment years ago. A family dinner at an overpriced steakhouse. It quietly covered the bill, sliding my card across the table without fanfare. Cressida had stood up and raised her glass. To us, she'd said, voice warm and performative. To staying together no matter what. She didn't mention who had paid. No one did. They clinked glasses, smiled for photos, and posted about how close our family was. It convinced myself not to mind. Told myself that being the reliable one meant not needing the spotlight. But this wasn't oversight. This was erasure intentional and digital. I started downloading the stories. Every photo, every reel, every comment. I screenshotted the banner, the caption, the comment thread. I pasted each one into a new document and named it Reunion Public Archive. Then I added it to the folder. They'd removed me from the room, but they hadn't expected I'd be watching from the doorway. I wasn't going to argue or beg to be let in. I wasn't going to ask why. I wasn't going to text, did I do something wrong? That chapter was over. I whispered, barely audible over the buzz of my laptop fan. You don't get to humiliate me on camera and still cash my check. The receptionist hesitated, then her voice landed like a stone. The original booking was under Cheryl Gellhorn, but it was updated to Cressida Morell 2 days ago. That sentence stayed with me the rest of the day, long after I left the venue. Friday afternoon settled in with a deceptive calm, the kind that made you feel like the world had finally exhaled. But inside me, a storm. I sat curled near the living room window, My laptop perched on one thigh. The coffee I had made hours ago, now a bitter pool in a chipped mug. The inbox blinked, a new message. Subject: Thank you from the Ridgewood event team. I clicked without thinking. My breath paused. Dear Ms. Cressida Morrill, we appreciate your generous coordination of last night's legacy celebration. It was a joy to host such a meaningful gathering. Your leadership made the event a true success. We look forward to working with you again. I read it once, then again, and again. The words didn't change. The praise stood tall. They believed she had organized it, that she had paid, that the applause, the floral arrangements, the catered hors d'oeuvres, the sparkling water on ice were hers to claim. Attached to the email was the invoice. My signature still sat neatly at the bottom, but the billing section, rewritten. My name was gone. Hers was now printed in clean Helvetica, Cressida Morrill. It wasn't credit card fraud. No. This wasn't financial theft in the traditional sense. It was deeper, more personal, a theft of presence, a swap of visibility, the kind of erasure that makes people question their own memory of being there. I stared at the screen until the glare felt like it was burning through my eyes. Then, something old and familiar came back to me plaque. 2 years ago, a charity dinner for a women's shelter. Cressida had hosted it, yes, but I had quietly covered over 70% of the fundraising shortfall in the final week. I had wired $2,500 without a single call or announcement. That night, she walked on stage and received a framed certificate in honor of Cressida Morrill Advocate. Leader, donor, no mention of me. Not even a nod. Back then, I told myself, it's not about recognition, but sitting here now, I had to wonder, should it have been? Almost on autopilot, I opened Instagram. There she was again. Cressida, a new post, a carousel of professionally lit photos from last week's so-called wellness gala in Dallas. I recognized the soft pink linens, the string lights, the smiling women in white. My name wasn't tagged anywhere, but my budget sure had been. Her caption? Grateful to give back and celebrate sisterhood. Funding this was a dream come true. Legacy built, or women's voices, saw give back glow. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I just saved the post, dragged it into a folder on my desktop I had labeled long ago. They knew. Her smile in the final photo so polished, so effortless, looked like a borrowed mask. The comments were worse. You're the heart of your family, Cressida. Inspiring as always. You really walk the walk, girl. It felt like watching someone parade around in my skin. I opened my notes app and typed with trembling thumbs. You used my name to pay your taxes. You used my money to throw your party. Now you use my silence to polish your image. The blinking cursor waited. I hovered over the share icon, but something in me paused. She wouldn't confess. She'd just redirect. They'd twist it, tell me I was being petty. Always taking things too personally, Cheryl. So instead, I took a screenshot of the note, saved it under a new folder on my desktop, unsent because they'd spin it. That night, I stayed off social media. No scrolling, no checking the family group chat, no calls to my parents, who I already knew wouldn't ask how I was feeling. Instead, I opened a new folder titled Proof of Transfer and began uploading every document I had: bank records, receipts, date-stamped wire transfers tied to the gala. Then another, event discrepancies. Into that one, I filed the altered PDF invoice, the thank you email to her, the Instagram screenshots, and my original booking confirmation. I wasn't making noise. I was collecting weight. For years, I let them tell the story. Let them claim I was just generous, not interested in attention, comfortable in the background. But the truth is, generosity doesn't mean erasure, and staying silent doesn't mean consent. If Cressida needed my money to appear noble, maybe I needed the truth to look unapologetically unforgiving. And this time, I wasn't going to ask permission to exist. I hadn't cried in days. That used to feel like strength, like resilience. Like maybe I was finally past the point where they could reach in and twist something inside me. But now, it just felt vacant. It meant I'd entered a different phase entirely, one where I wasn't even reacting anymore. Just collecting. Just cataloging. My body moved, my voice answered when needed, but my mind was busy filing moments into categories. Betrayal, omission, confirmation. By late Saturday afternoon, the silence around me grew louder than I could handle. ID cleaned the same counter twice, ignored 3 text messages, and stared at a half-finished bowl of oatmeal that had gone cold hours ago. Eventually, I picked up the phone and called my mother. She answered on the second ring, already armed with the voice she reserved for performances, the polished, airy tone she used with neighbors, at fundraisers, or when she needed something to sound like love. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, drawing out the syllables like they were warm honey. "How are you holding up?" I didn't indulge her act. "I just want to ask you something directly," I said, my tone flat. "Did you all know I wasn't coming to the reunion?" There was a pauseless, then a second, but I felt it hit like a cold wind. Her answer came too smooth, too practiced. "Let's not make this bigger than it is. You're overthinking again. The weekend was lovely. It wasn't about leaving you out." "Then what was it about?" "Family has to move on, Cheryl, and honestly, you know how emotional your sister gets. She just didn't want any tension." So there it was. I wasn't excluded because he'd done something wrong. I was excluded because my presence was tension. My existence complicated their narrative. I was the knot in the ribbon they were trying to tie around their perfectly curated family moments. "And no one thought to correct the date?" I asked. "Even after I sent confirmations? Twice?" Another silence. I already knew the answer, but I needed to hear what excuse she'd reach for. Things were moving fast. I'm sure it wasn't personal. "Can we let it rest now?" That sentence rang in my head like a bell. Can we let it rest now? Translation: Can you stop making us uncomfortable with your awareness? That was the moment I knew this wasn't a miscommunication. It wasn't a scheduling error. It was a quiet, mutual agreement, one no one had to say aloud. I was the element they had voted, unanimously and passively, to subtract. After the call, I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where, just a few weeks earlier, I had wired money for the event. The irony wasn't lost on me. My name was on the invoice, but not the guest list. My phone buzzed. A text from my dad's number lit up the screen. Glad she stayed out of it. Elian was finally relaxed. Then, seconds later, another message. This weekend would have been a mess if she came. They meant to send those to someone else. I sat still, didn't breathe for a moment. The kind of stillness where your body feels too heavy to move, and your lungs forget their function. I wasn't angry, not yet. That would come later. In that moment, I was hollowed out. They weren't just okay with me being absent. They were grateful. Out of instinct, I opened Instagram, searched for Cressida's profile again. This time, I wasn't looking at decorations or outfits. I was hunting for faces, my parents' faces. My mother clapping as the cake was cut. My father mid-toast, eyes glassy, voice confident. To balance, to peace. To the people who show up with love. No one asked where I was. No one seemed to notice I wasn't there. It was as if I had already been edited out of the story, like it'd been photoshopped out of the family album, while the party continued seamlessly. I closed the app. Opened my laptop. A blank document stared back at me. I titled it, Pattern of Language. And I started typing. Let's not make this bigger than it is. You're overthinking again. She's too emotional. Glad she stayed out of it. This weekend would have been a mess if she came. I copied and pasted each quote. These weren't just careless remarks. They were coordinated patterns, recitations of the same themes, repeated over years in slightly different forms. Evidence, not accidents. Patterns, not slips. I didn't respond to my dad's messages. I didn't call my mother back. What could I possibly say that they hadn't already dismissed before I even spoke? Instead, I opened the voice memo from our call, downloaded it, dragged it into a folder I'd quietly labeled. They knew. There would be no confrontation, no dramatic showdowns, just quiet documentation. I wasn't collecting these receipts to win a fight. I was collecting them because I was done pretending they didn't exist. They wanted peace? Fine, they could have it. In the version of our family, where I was the problem that solved itself by vanishing. If silence was the story they chose, then documentation would be mine. And this time, I wouldn't be edited out. Sunday morning arrived not with ease, but with edge. The sunlight didn't spill into my apartment. It stabbed through the blinds, laying hard shadows across the floor, as if to say, "You're not done yet." It wasn't a morning built for rest. It was a morning that demanded answers. I sat at my desk with a lukewarm cup of coffee, sorting through old emails, automated alerts, newsletters I never read, receipts from dinners I didn't enjoy. A low hum of irritation had been simmering inside me for days, and I thought perhaps clearing out digital clutter might help clear my mind. That's when my phone rang. Unknown number. Local area code. I hesitated, then picked up. "Good morning," a bright but brittle voice said. "This is Casey from Ridgewood Resort. We're following up regarding last Thursday's event. Ms. Morell mentioned you may want a final guest usage report and catering breakdown." I blinked. "Ms. Morell?" "I'm sorry," I said slowly, "but I made that reservation." There was a pause, a sharp inhale, then a softer exhale, one laced with worry. "Apologies," Casey said. "Our files show the original reservation was under Cheryl Gellhorn, but the hosting contact and authorization forms were updated to Ms. Cressida Morell 48 hours before the event." I stared at the screen like it had betrayed me. "Did the payment method change?" I asked, my voice steady but colder now. "No, Mom. The payment was charged to the card ending in 48 to 19. Still under your name." "Of course it was." I thanked her, if you could call the flat word I offered thanks. Then I ended the call and immediately sent a formal request for all written correspondence involving the event, every message, every update, every staff memo that mentioned my name or Cressida's. 20 minutes later, they arrived. I opened the PDF bundle and scanned quickly, eyes catching on one particular subject line: update to guest record. Her email was calculated, charming in that predatory way only Cressida could manage. She hadn't asked, she'd informed. "My sister won't be attending. For liability reasons, please ensure my name is listed as the event host. She has given full consent." Consent. A lie. Typed in Arial 12-point font, sent without hesitation. As casual as requesting sparkling water instead of still. As smooth as she'd always been. I started saving everything, dragged files into my desktop folder titled Event Discrepancies, renamed screenshots to include timestamps. I was no longer documenting a misunderstanding. I was gathering proof of intent. And then it got worse. A text pinged on my phone, not an email this time, a number I didn't recognize. Just a plain gray bubble. "I'm not supposed to say this." Then, a moment later, the sender identified themselves. Elian. The sad face emoji nearly broke me. Not because of how childish it was, but because it wasn't filtered. Children rarely hide their truth well, and sometimes that's the only truth left. But everyone knew. "Mommy said not to tell you." "I'm sorry." I felt like I'd been gut-punched by a whisper. It didn't knock the air out of me, but it reached places no shout ever could. My hand froze. My breathing stalled. I didn't reply. I just placed the phone face down on the desk, carefully, like setting down a glass you know is already cracked. Then I opened a new Word document. I titled it Voices Ignored, and typed in the message from Elian, including the timestamp, the phone number, and the contact name. Next, I created a second folder on my drive, Collusion by Silence. It was a phrase that had haunted me for months without having the vocabulary. Now I had both. This wasn't some family drama gone wrong. It wasn't about oversight or tension. It was a plan. A layered, deliberate decision to erase me not with rage, but with paperwork, with politeness, with silence. I stood up slowly, looking around my living room. The framed photos, the receipts pinned to the board by the door, the scrapbook of RSVP lists, all of it had been a record of love, effort, hope. Now they were evidence, not of crime, but of erasure. Every time they had crossed out my name and inserted hers, every phone call I hadn't gotten, every thank you that never came, it wasn't a slip. It was a signature move. That night, I didn't cry. I opened a blank document titled Formal Statement Draft Internal Use Only. I wasn't ready to send it to anyone, not yet. But I needed a place to start laying it all out: dates, quotes, names, intentions. I needed to have my own version of the truth written down, in case I was ever told again that I was imagining things. And as I typed, one line from Elian wouldn't leave my head. Mommy said not to tell you. That was all I needed to know. The adults had orchestrated the cover-up, but a child told the truth. And I would not forget that. I wanted to know where the line was between insult and impersonation, and how close they had come. I woke up to a doorbell. Not the chime of someone excited to see me, just the dull, practical buzz of a FedEx delivery. The box sat awkwardly on the doormat like it regretted being there. I brought it inside, unsealed the top, and unfolded the flaps. On top of the tissue paper was a note card. Thick stock, cream-colored, handwriting I knew too well. Wish you could have made it. We saved you something. Beneath it sat a cloth napkin, wrinkled, stained with what looked like wine. A plastic fork still wrapped in the paper ring that usually sat beside Buffett Schaefer's, and a miniature box of mints, half crushed. At the bottom was a name tag sticker with my name written in Sharpie folded in half. They'd mailed me leftovers. I didn't cry. I didn't throw it. I took out my phone and snapped a photo from directly above. Light neutral, no filter. Then I moved the box to the trash, pressing it down into the liner until the tissue paper crumpled audibly beneath my palm. The email from Ridgewood came a few hours later, automated, polite. Thank you, Ms. Cressida Morell, for your generosity in sponsoring the Legacy Luncheon. My stomach dropped, even though I expected it by now. Attached was a high-resolution PDF with a gold border, listing her as the sponsor. I checked the invoice number. It matched the one from my bank transfer. My money, my transaction ID. So I called. Not as a client, not as a curious guest. I called as the payer. The woman who answered at the events desk introduced herself as Lauren. I asked about the name change. She paused. Yes, she said cautiously. We received the payment from a Cheryl Gellhorn, but all signage and documentation on the day of the event were updated at the request of Ms. Morell. And that's allowed? I asked, voice steady. Someone can use another's payment and change the credited name without their consent. Only if they state shared authority, she replied. In this case, the email indicated that you had agreed. I asked for a copy of that message. When it arrived, there it was. Cheryl won't be joining us. She's asked me to take over the coordination and be listed accordingly. A full lie. Undiluted. I saved it all. I opened a new folder on my desktop titled Evidence of Erasure. Into it went the photo of the gift box, the receipt, the thank you letter, the email chain. I moved slowly, deliberately, like someone handling glassware in an earthquake. Later that evening, I sat at my desk and opened my journal. I gave this entry a name. No more witnesses, only records. I wrote until my fingers cramped, until the pen ink smudged across my palm. They kept my contributions and discarded my name. They want the checkbook, not the person. They want my silence, not my presence. It wasn't a tantrum, it was a filing. Then I opened my email and began drafting something with a different tone. More legal, more distant. It wasn't for sending, at least, not yet. But I wanted to see it on paper, to know that if I needed it, the case was ready. After dinner, I walked the trash outside. The air was still warm, unseasonably so for November. I stood by the bin for a moment, then turned around and went back inside. I retrieved the box, placed it on my dining table, took one more photo, this time with my finger pointing at the card. I renamed the image file Exhibit Saxe Psychological Undermining, JPG. Then I tossed the box a second time and didn't look back. They didn't just want me out of the room. They wanted me quiet, unacknowledged, bankrolling the version of family they could pose beside, while pretending I was too dramatic to be included. But the truth doesn't need volume, just records. You don't get to shame someone in a card and still call it kindness. It wasn't revenge. It was history, and I was just restoring my part in it. Tuesday morning, I sat in my kitchen with a black coffee gone cold and 36 pages of truth open on my screen. The file name was simple. They knew. It was cleaner than I expected. No colors, no bold fonts, just dates, emails, contracts, invoices, screenshots, and silence. At the top, I typed a subject line. For those who asked, here's what actually happened. I didn't write a greeting. I didn't ask for understanding. I attached the PDF, addressed it to my entire extended family, every person who'd reposted Cressida's highlight reel, every PR client listed on her LinkedIn bio, and a few others who used to say, "You're the good one." Before hitting send, I reread the subject line. I hovered over send, then clicked it. No hesitation. The response didn't come from the people I expected. 10 minutes in, my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen since high school Trina. Her message read, "Just saw the doc. I always wondered why you were never in their family posts. Makes sense now." A second one came from a coworker, Julia, someone I barely spoke to at lunch. That hit harder than I thought it would. Thank you for not being silent. By noon, Cressida had gone quiet online. Her latest Instagram post, an inspirational quote in cursive about growth through grace, was turned off for comments. The caption had been edited. Some people air private matters for attention. Real ones know the truth. I didn't reply. She wanted to turn my evidence into a tantrum. Let her try. My phone buzzed again. Voicemail, my mother. "Cheryl, honey, please delete that file. This is hurting your sister's business. She's having a hard enough time with everything already. Not a word about the truth. Just concern about appearances." But then, a different email came in. From my Uncle Me Dad's brother, who'd said nothing during any of it. Not even at the funeral, when they left my name off the family flower arrangement card. It said simply, "Good." They needed to see it. I read that line 3 times. Later that evening, I made tea and sat on the balcony while the sun dipped behind the trees, casting gold light over the roof lines. I wasn't waiting for more responses. I wasn't refreshing inboxes or watching view counts. I just sat still, and in that silence, I whispered the words that had been sitting inside me for years. You taught me silence. I only mirrored it, but now you'll hear mine. They built a narrative and handed me a muzzle, but the quiet girl kept records, and today, she sent them out. The next morning, I changed my last name on every professional platform, quietly and completely. The air downtown felt too clean. I walked into the attorney's office with a folder tucked under my arm and a silence in my chest that was no longer grief, it was preparation. I didn't sit back when I spoke. I didn't fidget. I laid the contract on her desk. Ridgewood Resort. My payment. Cressida's name on the signage. She scanned it quickly, flipping to the back. "You signed this," she confirmed. "And you paid?" "Yes." "And this," she held up the updated version, "was submitted without your consent?" "Correct." 2 days before the event. She told them I wasn't coming. That she was the new host. The attorney looked up. She impersonated a financial contributor. "That crosses into civil territory. You're not just being erased, you were replaced." I didn't ask for justice. I asked for a copy of her assessment. Something official. Something that turned my emotion into documentation. That afternoon, I went home and opened my 2021 tax folders. In one spreadsheet, hidden beneath March statements, was the wire transfer. $18,200. The memo read, "Emergency Cressida. IRS Leanne." I remembered the call like it had just happened. Cressida sobbing in her salon office, red lipstick smeared across her palm from wiping her face, begging me not to let her license be suspended. She'd missed a series of tax deadlines. No one else could help. "I'll pay you back," she'd said. She never did, and I never brought it up. Until now. I printed the transfer receipt and slipped it into a clear plastic folder. The label read, Exhibit 2021, Personal Financial Assistance .pdf. My phone buzzed around 6:45. Cressida's name lit up my screen, not a call. A voice memo. I played it through once. Her tone was syrupy at first, then sharp. You've always needed to feel superior. That's why you keep score. You didn't help out of love. You helped so you could hold it over me. Maybe you should thank me. People finally see you now. I didn't flinch. I saved the file, named it Audio Exhibit, SHA-16B, dragged it into the folder marked Unpaid Debts and Public Humiliation. My calm unnerved even me. I didn't answer. Instead, I printed one last letter. A single page, typed, straightforward. You no longer have permission to speak, act, or represent anything using my name, resources, or personal history. Any such actions moving forward will be considered identity misrepresentation and pursued accordingly. At the bottom, I attached a notarized copy of the 2021 bank wire. I signed it with a pen that hadn't left my desk drawer in 2 years. The next morning, I had it hand-delivered. No email, no subject line, no warning. I didn't imagine her opening it. I didn't indulge that fantasy. I had no need to see her face when it landed. Instead, I brewed tea, sat on my back porch, scanned the leaves trembling in the wind, and let myself breathe. Some receipts don't fade. They age into evidence. That night, I didn't post anything. No farewell speech, no cryptic quotes, no final mic drop. I simply removed every digital tag, mention, or trace that connected me to their legacy, their version of me. The one they edited, cropped, and controlled. I deleted it like you would a corrupted file. Not out of anger, but clarity. That chapter was over, and I no longer needed to explain the ending. 2 months had passed since I mailed the letter, the one that laid everything bare. I hadn't heard a single word in return. Not from Cressida, not from my parents, not even from the distant relatives who used to call every Sunday asking if I'd be attending this or that family function. Their silence, once heavy and sharp, had lost its edge. It was just silence now. Clean, uncluttered, like a cleared field after the snow melts. Vermont helped. The air moved slower here. It didn't rush to justify itself. My apartment was modest second floor above a cozy bookstore cafe, run by a retired couple who asked for nothing but kindness and responded with fresh scones and shared laughter. I had a single shelf of books, a pothos that thrived on neglect, and a mailbox labeled in neat black letters. Cheryl Elaine. I had dropped the surname the way you drop an overworn coat, not because I was hiding, but because I was finally choosing what name would sit at the top of my mail, my life, my story. I wasn't carrying anyone else's legacy now, just mine. Around the holidays, something unexpected happened. The first card arrived, then 3 more. All handwritten, all from cousins. Not a word from Cressida, nothing from Lenora. But one envelope stood out light blue, silver ink, the kind you buy in a clearance pack. Inside was a single line, written in even cursive. Thank you for telling the truth. It gave the rest of us permission. I read it 3 times. Then I pinned it to the fridge, right next to a black and white drawing by Elian. A stick figure holding a mug, with Aunt M scribbled underneath in crayon. Sometimes, I still found myself checking my voicemail. Not because I was hoping for anything, but out of sheer habit. I listened to Cressida's last message again one afternoon, just to see if it still cut. It didn't. I heard her voice the way you'd listen to a recording in a museum exhibit, detached, historical. You've always needed to feel superior. Delete. Closure didn't come with confrontation. It didn't roar in like some satisfying movie ending. It whispered in quietly when I realized I no longer needed an apology with an expiration date. I didn't need to be proven right. I just needed to walk away without dragging their shadows behind me. Then, out of nowhere, a letter arrived. It was handwritten in pencil on folded notebook paper. The return address read, Elian Kroll, CEO, Jeanette. Friend's mom. The handwriting was young but careful. I still remember how you always brought me mint tea. I hope you're happy. Tucked inside was a small drawing of a lemon slice floating in a teacup, held in place by a paperclip. I teared up, not because it broke me, but because even after everything, someone small remembered the good parts, the quiet, gentle, honest ones, the ones that mattered. I wrote back the same day, I am. And I hope you'll always tell the truth, even when the adults don't. There were still echoes. A certain song on the radio, the smell of cinnamon, the way the light slanted across the kitchen table in the late afternoon. But those moments didn't pull me back anymore. They brushed past like wind through open windows. I noticed them, then let them go. Weeks later, I signed up as a mentor for a small business program at the local community center. The room was filled with dreamers people hoping to start bakeries, cleaning services, mobile pet spas, and flower trucks. They didn't care what my last name used to be. They cared that I showed up, that I listened, that I had stories and structure and sincerity to offer. One woman, early 40s, chipped red nail polish, and a leather-bound planner paused midway through her pitch and asked, "Did you ever work in events before? You seem like someone who knows how to hold a room." I smiled not at her, but at how far I had come. "No," I said, "but I've seen exactly how not to run one." And in that moment, I didn't feel bitterness. I felt whole. I used to fight for a seat at their table. I gave them chairs, linen napkins, centerpieces, and still they called me an afterthought. So I built my own room. And this time, I left the door open only for those who knock. Sometimes healing doesn't come with a loud declaration. It comes quietly when you stop chasing closure and start choosing yourself. I spent years believing that love meant tolerance, that loyalty required silence. But silence can become a permission slip for people to erase you while smiling in your direction. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Your peace is not a gift you owe anyone who profits from your absence. Walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Drawing a boundary isn't cruelty, it's clarity. And telling the truth, even when your voice shakes, is not an act of rebellion. It's an act of remembering that you matter, even when they pretend you don't. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from people who refuse to see your worth? Have you ever been the one left out of the picture, even though you were the one who held the frame? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story touched something in you. Or tell me where you're watching from, I'd love to know. If this story wasn't for you, I still want to hear your thoughts. What made you stay through to the end? And hey, if you found even a sliver of truth in this story, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. We've got more stories coming on that remind you you're not alone, and that your voice, your name, your presence matter more than they ever told you. Hi, my name's Sky. The day I got the lead role in our school play, I thought everything would finally change, but I didn't know how it would. That night, my sister pressed a hot curling iron against my face while I slept. My mom said it was an accident, and made me sign a statement to say so. My dad, he just told me not to make a scene. But when the school nurse peeled off the bandage weeks later and saw what they tried to hide, everything started to unravel. What kind of family lets their child burn just to protect an image? And what happens when that child refuses to stay silent? They announced the cast list on a Monday. The hallway outside the theater department had never felt so narrow, like the walls were closing in on every single one of us, waiting to see who'd earned their shot under the lights. I wasn't even sure why I checked it. Part of me assumed, no, expected, not to see my name at all. Isolde always got the lead. She was the golden one, the trained soprano, the perfect daughter who'd been singing solos since we were kids. But that morning, taped to a sad piece of printer paper under the tacky marquee font, Christine, Sky Marlowe. I just stood there, my name, in bold, in ink. The hum of other students around me seemed to blur. Someone squealed. Someone muttered, "Seriously?" But all I could hear was my own pulse pounding in my ears. I wanted to smile, to run, to call someone, anyone, but I turned slowly and saw her. Isolde, standing 2 lockers down. Her lips were pressed so tight they'd gone white. No congratulatory hug, no fake smile, just a stare cold enough to peel paint. "You happy now?" she asked, barely audible. Her voice had this sharp edge, like she wasn't surprised, just wounded in a way that made me feel like the enemy. I shrugged. "I guess I did okay in the callback." She didn't respond. Just turned and walked away, every movement precise like she was on stage already. That night at dinner, my mom, Vera, clapped once. One slow, measured clap. "Let's try not to let this go to your head, Sky," she said. "You'll need a lot of work to be believable next to your sister." Alaric, my dad, barely looked up from his phone. I sat there with mashed potatoes turning cold on my plate, wondering what I was supposed to feel. Pride? Fear? Guilt? They didn't congratulate me. They didn't smile. Just silence and tension so thick I thought the ceiling would cave in. Later that night, I went to bed early. My alarm was set for 5:30 a.m. so I could get in some extra vocal warm-ups before school. I remember lying in bed, eyes on the ceiling, replaying the moment I saw my name again and again, trying to believe it was real. Somewhere in the dark, sleep came. And then it didn't. I woke up screaming. The pain hit before my brain even caught up. A blinding flash of heat seared across my cheek and temple. I thrashed. My fingers clawed the blanket. Something sizzled. When I opened my eyes, she was standing there. Isolde, hair perfect, silk robe tied too neatly for someone who just happened to be nearby. In her right hand, her curling iron, still glowing orange. I couldn't get the words out. The smell of burned skin, plastic, something chemical filled the room. "You weren't supposed to win," she whispered. "This was my year." She left without another word. I curled into the corner of my bed, gasping for breath, trying not to throw up from the pain. I don't remember how long I laid there before Vera stormed in. No panic, just annoyance. "Jesus, Sky, keep it down," she hissed. "You'll wake the neighbors." She didn't ask what happened. She didn't scream at Isolde. She yanked the comforter off the bed and stared at my face like I was the one who'd ruined something. "We need to fix this," she said flatly. "Can't have your drama jeopardizing your sister's college apps." "I didn't! She burned me!" I cried, voice hoarse. Vera rolled her eyes and yanked me toward the bathroom. She pulled open the cabinet, slathered some ointment on her fingers, and smeared it across my blistering cheek. It stung so badly I saw stars. "You'll say it was an accident," she said. "You were practicing for the role, curling your hair. It slipped. That's all." "No," I whispered. She held up a printed sheet, already prepared, already signed by her. A written statement for the school nurse. "I said you slipped, Sky," she said through clenched teeth. "You're not going to blow this up. Not when things are finally lining up." I looked at the paper, then at her. Her nails were perfectly done, no smudges. She'd had time to print, prepare, control everything. This wasn't a reaction. It was a plan. "You're siding with her?" I choked out. "I'm protecting all of us," she replied. She shoved a pen into my hand. My fingers were trembling. The bathroom mirror caught a glimpse of me, hair tangled, face red and blistered, eyes barely holding back tears. And still, I signed it. Not because I believed her, but because I knew, in that moment, no one else was going to protect me. Afterward, she handed me a scarf and told me to practice smiling in the mirror. I didn't. I couldn't. The next morning, I walked to school like nothing had happened. My skin burned with every gust of wind. Inside, something even worse had started to sting. I looked in the mirror one last time before heading out the door, and the reflection looking back at me wasn't me anymore. It was someone smaller, someone silenced. That was the first time I betrayed myself to protect everyone else. But that wasn't the only lie I had to tell. The morning after I signed the statement, I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of tea pressed gently to the side of my face. The swelling had set in overnight, and now even the smallest movements, chewing, speaking, blinking, sent shockwaves of pain down my jaw. The mint tea was lukewarm, but it was the only thing that didn't make me gag. The kitchen smelled like lemon disinfectant and burnt toast, a contrast to the quiet tension that filled the room. My father finally walked in, still in his hospital scrubs, clearly just home from his overnight shift. He barely looked at me. "Did you see her?" my mother asked, nodding toward me. Alaric set down his keys without responding. He moved to the fridge, pulled out a bottle of water, cracked the seal, and drank half of it before finally turning toward us. His eyes scanned my face. Not quickly, not with concern, like he was trying to calculate something. I straightened up, silently pleading for something, anything. A flicker of doubt, of outrage, of acknowledgement. Instead, he said, "You can't go to school like that, not looking like that." I blinked. Now that, he walked over, opened the medicine drawer, pulled out a silver tube, and held it out. "Apply this twice a day. Keep the wound clean. No direct sun. And wear something that covers it. People don't need to see that." "Are you serious?" I asked, voice cracking. "You're a doctor. You know this should be treated by—" "Let's keep this in-house," he interrupted, tone flat. "No need to escalate things." There it was. Not even subtle. No, "How did this happen?" No, "Do you need help?" Just a professional recommendation and a silent plea to keep the family's reputation untouched. My mom chimed in, "We've already handled it. Sky understands." I stared at them both, feeling less like a daughter and more like an unwanted liability. By the time I got to school, the makeup Vera had layered on my cheek was already cracking. It wasn't even foundation. It was this heavy theater-grade concealer she'd found in the back of the bathroom cabinet. The kind of thing you'd use to hide stage bruises, not real ones. First period dragged by in a haze. No one said anything, but they looked. I kept my head low, answering questions with nods or one-word mumbles. Every glance felt like a silent accusation. Between second and third period, I passed the bulletin board in the office hallway, the same one where they'd posted the cast list. But this time, it was covered in a new flyer. Spring Gala sponsors. Special thanks to the Marlowe Foundation for the Arts. I felt the blood drain from my face. My mother hadn't just forced me into silence, she'd bought my silence in advance. That was her play. Wrap our family name in enough goodwill, people wouldn't question the bruises underneath. During lunch, I sat outside behind the science wing. Fewer people passed through there. I picked at a granola bar and stared at the pavement. The sharp wind carried over snippets of voices from across the yard. I heard she did it to herself. Like for attention. That's what my mom said. Drama girls are all nuts anyway. Her sister's so talented. I bet she's sick of being overshadowed. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I reached up and pressed gently against the side of my face. The skin felt stretched, tight, fragile. Miss Martin, the drama teacher, avoided my gaze when I walked past her after lunch. She was talking to the principal, and both of them quieted the moment I entered the office to drop off a late pass. Their fake smiles were transparent. That evening, Vera was waiting for me at the kitchen counter. "I spoke with Miss Martin," she said without looking up from her phone. "She's supportive. We've agreed it's best to limit unnecessary distractions backstage." I dropped my backpack louder than I needed to. Distractions? Like what? My face? My existence? She finally looked at me. "Like drama, Sky. This is your sister's last year." "Let's not ruin that." I opened my mouth, but she raised her hand. "Don't start. You already agreed." No, I hadn't. I'd signed a lie. That's different. My dad passed through on his way to the living room. "Let it go, Sky. You don't want to be the reason the school gets dragged into something it can't clean up." Clean up. That was their priority. Bleach the stains, hide the cracks, paint over the mold. Later that night, I stood in the bathroom again, same mirror, same lighting, but a different reflection. My cheek was a patchwork of scabs and raw skin. My eyes looked sunken. I reached for the concealer, but stopped. I left the bathroom light on and the door half open, walked down the hall, and stood in front of Isolde's bedroom. Her door was closed. I could hear her singing softly inside, practicing a ballad from the show. Her voice, flawless as always, echoed through the thin wall. I knocked once. Silence. Then her voice, cool and casual. If you're looking for sympathy, I'm all out. I didn't say anything. Just stood there, the heat from my injury pulsing like a drumbeat. Finally, I said, "You didn't just hurt me. You erased me." She laughed quietly. "Oh, please, don't be dramatic. No one would have believed you anyway." I turned and walked away, because she was right. At least, for now. After that hallway exchange with Isolde, I went straight to my room. I didn't slam the door or scream into a pillow like a teenager in a bad drama. I just stood there, staring at the wall, as if waiting for it to speak up and confirm everything I was afraid to admit. Later that night, long after everyone else had turned in, I found myself lying awake, staring at the cracks in the ceiling. The pain in my cheek had dulled to a constant throb, no longer screaming, just whispering that it hadn't gone away. I pressed my hand gently to it and felt the texture of healing skin beneath the layers of ointment and concealer. But the real pain wasn't in the wound anymore. It was in the questions that kept circling in my head. Why did she sound so calm when she did it? How did my mom have a statement ready so fast? And why did my dad know exactly what medicine to give me without asking what really happened? None of this was new. That's what started to get to me. Around 2 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and got out of bed. I tiptoed down the hallway. The house was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards under my bare feet. I passed Isolde's door. It was cracked open slightly, and her TV cast flickering blue light across the hallway. She was asleep on her side, facing the wall, as if none of this touched her. I turned toward the study. That room was mostly off-limits to me, not explicitly, but in the way that some rooms carry silence like a lock. My mother used it as her personal organization space, and I knew she kept all our important files there. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe a clue that this wasn't all in my head. I sat down at the desk, flipped on the small lamp, and opened the top drawer. Bills, PTA schedules, notes from Vera's church group. Everything filed and color-coded. The second drawer was messier. Loose envelopes, an old checkbook, a stack of family photos I hadn't seen in years. I reached past those and opened the bottom drawer, stiff, like it hadn't been used in a while. Inside, tucked in a file labeled Family Notes, I saw a folded piece of stationery with my name written on the corner. No, not my name. Isolde's handwriting. I opened it carefully. The paper was creased and slightly yellowed. The ink had faded just enough to look aged. "Sky, I'm sorry about the stairs. I didn't mean to push you that hard. I was mad you got the solo and I didn't. Please don't tell Mom. She'll be furious. I swear I didn't mean for you to get that hurt." My hands began to shake. The stairs. It hit me like a gust of wind through a broken window. Years ago, in 7th grade, I'd fallen down the back stairs at home. I'd hit my head and fractured my wrist. Everyone thought I slipped. Vera said, "That's what happens when you run around like a maniac." But I hadn't been running. I'd been coming downstairs with a music binder, and Isolde had been behind me. I flipped the letter over. On the back, stuck to the corner, was a yellow sticky note in my mother's neat, rigid handwriting. Never let her see this. My stomach clenched. It wasn't just about this week or this role. It had never been. I sank back in the chair, the letter trembling in my hands, and let the weight of it all settle in my chest. The gaslighting, the cover-ups, the polite smiles over bruises. This wasn't about protecting the family. It was about protecting Isolde's place in it. And Vera, she hadn't just looked the other way. She'd actively hidden the evidence. I sat there for what felt like an hour, eyes darting across the lines of ink again and again. All those moments I'd dismissed, all those times I'd blamed myself for being clumsy, too sensitive, too dramatic, they started stacking up like bricks. There was the deleted video from my scholarship audition that vanished the night before the deadline. There was the lost letter from the summer theater program that Vera said must have been a mix-up in the mail. There was the time my favorite dress was found in the trash days before my choir solo. Now it all felt intentional. I folded the letter and tucked it into the waistband of my pajama pants. I didn't trust it in my pocket, not when someone could toss it before morning. On the way back to my room, I paused in front of my parents' bedroom door. From inside, I could hear the low buzz of the TV. They were still awake, probably watching the news, sipping wine, wrapped in the delusion of normalcy they worked so hard to maintain. And me? I'd finally woken up. Back in bed, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My mind played through the past like a silent film on repeat. I saw every bruise, every glance away, every fake smile from teachers who'd heard rumors but never asked questions. And I whispered to myself, so low it barely reached my own ears. I've been taught to protect everyone, but who's protected me? The room didn't answer, but I knew one thing. This time, I wouldn't let it go. The letter never left my possession after that night. I folded it carefully and slid it behind the mirror in my bedroom, right at the edge of the frame where no one else would think to look. Every time I passed it, every time I touched that corner, it reminded me that the version of my family I'd always clung to, orderly, respectable, unified, was a story Vera had curated like a PR campaign. By the time Friday rolled around, the bruising on my cheek had started to fade into a muddled blend of yellow and gray. The pain was duller, but it pulsed beneath the surface like a warning signal. I got up early, took my time applying concealer in layers, smoothing it out as best as I could with the cheap sponge from my drawer. I pulled my hair forward, even though I hated how it hung in my face, and stared at the reflection. It wasn't perfect, but I looked presentable, enough to avoid another round of whispers. I got to school a few minutes before the bell, slipping into the side hallway where the drama bulletin board was posted. My steps slowed when I saw the crowd clustered around it, faces tilted upward, eyes scanning. Something had changed. I squeezed past a few freshmen, and there it was, the updated cast list for the spring musical. The same white sheet, same bold typeface, same location, except now, the lead read, Christine Isolde Marlowe. My name was gone. No strike-through, no footnote, no explanation. It was like I'd never existed. Miss Martin passed behind me as I stared. She didn't pause, didn't greet me, just walked into the theater room with her clipboard tucked close to her chest. I followed her. Inside, the stage lights were on low, casting soft shadows across the black box stage. A few of the other cast members were setting props, chattering lightly about rehearsal changes. I walked straight to her office in the back corner, knocked once, and stepped in. She looked up, startled. "Sky, can I help you?" I held up my hand, keeping my voice steady. "What happened to the cast list?" Miss Martin sighed, setting her clipboard aside. "I was going to talk to you this morning." I waited. "We thought it would be best to make some adjustments," she said, "given everything that's happened." I took a step forward. "What does that mean?" She leaned back in her chair. "You've been under a lot of stress. The accident, the tension with your sister. Your mom mentioned it might be overwhelming for you." "My mom?" I blinked. "So she came to you?" "She expressed concern for your well-being," Miss Martin said, choosing each word like they might be dissected in a courtroom, "and for the harmony of the ensemble." I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked, "Did anyone ask me how I felt?" She didn't answer, and that told me everything. I left the office without another word. My hands were trembling by the time I reached the edge of the theater. Isolde was center stage, chatting with the choreographer, laughing like none of it mattered, like I hadn't earned that role, like she hadn't taken something she had no right to touch. I turned and walked out. My legs carried me down the side hallway and into the art wing. I found a quiet classroom, empty, used mostly for sculpture storage, and closed the door behind me. Then I pulled out my phone. I opened the camera, switched to front-facing mode, and hit record. The screen lit up my face, uneven and pale under the fluorescence. The swelling had eased, but the discoloration was still there, even beneath the makeup. "My name is Sky Marlowe," I said. "And if you're watching this, it means someone finally cared enough to ask what really happened." I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just told the truth. I talked about the night Isolde burned me, about how Vera handed me a pre-written lie and told me to sign it, about the way Alaric, a doctor, refused to treat me properly because it might make people talk, about losing my role, my place, and slowly, the sense that I'd ever belonged anywhere in that family. When I finished, I saved the video and emailed it to myself, storing it in a locked folder with a duplicate copy in the cloud. Then I took a photo of the updated cast list and another of my reflection in the classroom window, bruise and all. They had taken my role, my voice, my presence in the very thing I loved most. But they couldn't erase my truth unless I let them. That evening, after I got home, I didn't sit at the dinner table. I went straight upstairs, closed my door, and started writing everything down. Not for school, not for anyone else, just for me, for the record. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I heard laughter downstairs. Vera's crisp voice, Isolde's delicate giggle, Alaric's low murmur. They were celebrating, probably toasting a clean solution. But I wasn't part of that scene anymore. And for the first time, I didn't want to be. I never thought silence could sound so loud until I stood in the locker-lined hallway, clutching my phone, reading that message. It was right after second period, just before lunch. I ducked into the restroom near the art wing, trying to avoid another awkward encounter with Miss Martin or one of the cast members who still pretended like I didn't exist. I opened my phone, mostly to distract myself, when the text came in. No contact name, no profile picture, just 5 words. Step back. Or we'll finish what we started. Followed by a single emoji. A small flame. That wasn't just some random threat. That symbol, one Isolde used in her old captions on Instagram whenever she performed, was her little signature, a subtle flourish, always styled the same way. My fingers went cold. At first, I froze. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered. The stall door behind me creaked open slowly, even though no one was in there. Everything around me felt like it was pressing inward. I read it again, then again. By the third time, fear had taken a back seat to something else, something sharper, more deliberate. I locked the phone, took a deep breath, and walked out of the restroom. No one was waiting, no one was watching, which somehow made it worse. That afternoon, instead of heading to rehearsal, or what had become Isolde's rehearsal, I went to the library. The far back corner where the old desktop computers sat unused. I logged into my school email, opened a draft folder, and began typing. A full record, dates, incidents, the video I'd recorded in the sculpture room, a scan of the letter Isolde had written about the stair accident, photos of the cast list, the texts. I embedded everything into a private folder on my drive. Then I opened the settings on my school account and created a rule. If the school nurse updated my health file again, a copy of the folder would be automatically sent to the district superintendent, the local newspaper editor, and the backup email I'd set up under a pseudonym. No theatrics, no drama, just preparation. The next day, I added voice, a quiet recording, filmed in my bedroom with the blinds drawn. My face was mostly in shadow, half because I wanted the privacy, and half because I wanted whoever watched it to focus on the words. "I'm not trying to ruin anyone," I said calmly. "I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it because being silent hasn't kept me safe, and because being erased again and again is its own kind of violence." I saved the video and placed it in the drive. Then I encrypted the folder with a password only I knew, tied to something no one in my family would ever guess. That evening, as I passed through the hallway outside the gym, I saw Isolde standing at her locker, alone for once. She wasn't smiling. She looked almost bored, twirling her keychain with one hand, staring at the mirror she'd taped inside. I didn't hesitate. "Isolde." She turned, slowly. "Wow, you're still here?" I stepped closer, close enough that she couldn't pretend not to hear me. "I'm not going to disappear," I said evenly. "And if anything else happens, if you touch me, if you threaten me again, it's all going public." She rolled her eyes. "You sound like one of those girls in movies, monologuing in the hallway." "I'm not performing," I said. "I'm warning you. I've got records, videos, files, timestamps. You won't talk your way out of this." She smirked, but I saw it, that little twitch in her jaw, the subtle shift in her stance. "You're bluffing," she said. "Try me." Then I walked away. No yelling, no insults, just the truth, spoken plainly. That night, I felt it again, that flicker of something I hadn't felt in weeks, Not safety, not hope, but control. Still, I knew it wasn't over. Vera came into my room later, holding a cup of tea. "I heard you're spending more time in the library," she said casually, setting the mug down on my desk. "I like the quiet," I answered, without turning. She hovered a moment longer. "You know, your sister's worked very hard. She doesn't need the added stress of dealing with all this noise." "Is that what you call it?" I asked. "Noise?" Her smile tightened. "I call it unnecessary distraction." I turned in my chair, looked her square in the eye. "You've spent a lot of time protecting her." "She needs it," Vera replied. "She's sensitive. She paused. "You're stronger." That was always her excuse, her way of rewriting every betrayal as favor. "You can handle it, Sky. You're more mature. You know how the world works." But the truth? She just didn't care to defend me. When she left the room, I didn't touch the tea. I opened my laptop instead and re-watched the video, not to change anything, just to remind myself I wasn't imagining it. The next morning at school, as I walked down the east hallway toward my locker, a group of juniors passed by. One of them whispered something to her friend. They both turned to look at me. I didn't bother listening in. Let them talk. Let them wonder. I wasn't hiding anymore. The next morning, I left the house earlier than usual. The sun was barely rising, casting long shadows across the lawn as I zipped up my hoodie and crossed the driveway. I didn't eat, didn't speak to anyone. Vera was in the kitchen, whispering on the phone when I passed by, probably to Miss Martin again. Alaric didn't even look up from his laptop. I walked the half-mile to school with one goal in mind: check the new rehearsal schedule. Part of me expected it, had rehearsed the possibility in my head the entire night. But seeing it, that made it real. The cast list was posted on the wall near the auditorium doors. I slowed as I approached, trying not to draw attention. The paper was crisp, just taped up minutes ago. The list of names was typed neatly, each role highlighted in bold. But my name wasn't there, not even in the ensemble. Christine, Isolde Marlowe. I stood still, eyes scanning the sheet again and again, as if somehow I'd missed something, as if maybe my name had been pushed down to another section. It hadn't. Behind me, footsteps approached. I turned. Miss Martin was walking toward the auditorium doors, carrying her clipboard. When she saw me standing there, she paused but didn't look surprised. "Sky," she said softly. "Come with me." We walked into the empty auditorium. The lights were dimmed, the stage bathed in the blue glow of early morning through the high windows. She led me to the front row and gestured for me to sit. I remained standing. "I saw the list," I said. "Is this a mistake?" She didn't answer right away. "Your mom and I spoke again yesterday," she began. "There's been a lot of tension, disruption. I decided, it would be better for the overall stability of the cast to move forward with someone more consistent." "You mean my sister," I said. "She's focused, less emotional." I stared at her. Less emotional? After what she did? Miss Martin's face tightened. "Sky, I don't want to get into family issues. That's not my role." "You mean it's not convenient?" I replied. She looked away. I left before she could say anything else. I didn't cry. Not then. I walked through the building like a ghost, numb from the neck down, drifting past classmates and teachers who didn't meet my eyes. As I reached my locker, I spotted Emma standing nearby, pretending to dig through her bag. She saw me and froze. I took a step toward her. "You knew, didn't you?" Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. "Sky, you were there the night I got burned. You saw the bruise the next morning. You even helped me cover it with makeup." She looked down. "I thought maybe it was an accident, that you'd dropped the curler or something. I didn't want to assume." "You didn't want to get involved," I said. She nodded once. "And now that I'm out of the show, that spot in the duet, you're getting it?" Silence. I laughed. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't even angry. just hollow. I get it. You kept quiet for a solo. How fitting. Sky, that's not fair. What's not fair is pretending to be my friend when it's convenient, and a stranger when it costs you something. I turned and walked away. By lunch, the shock had worn off, replaced with something sharper, controlled, cold. Back in the library, I opened the shared drive where I'd been storing everything, my video logs, scanned files, the auto-send triggers. I added a new video. This one was shorter. No introduction, no explanations. Just me, in the corner of the study room, looking directly at the lens. People don't always hurt you by hitting you, I said. Sometimes they do it by stepping aside and letting others swing. I paused. And sometimes, it's your oldest friend. After saving it, I sent a quiet link to Miss Carter, my former English teacher. She'd left the school 2 years ago, but still worked in the district office. If anyone might believe me, might actually do something with this, it was her. I didn't include a message, just the file. After school, I skipped rehearsal completely, walked straight home. Vera was in the garden, pruning roses like we weren't all living inside a house of broken glass. "Did you see the cast changes?" she asked without looking up. I did. She finally turned to face me. "I hope you understand. This isn't personal, Sky. It's about what's best for the production." I tilted my head. You mean what's best for your reputation?" She blinked. "That's not fair." "It's the truth." She straightened, holding the pruning shears with both hands. "You always make things harder than they need to be." "No, Mom," I said. "You do, by pretending nothing's wrong and blaming me when the truth shows up." And I walked past her, into the house, the sting of rosewater and fertilizer lingering in my nose. That night, I didn't add anything else to my folder. I didn't need to. Sometimes silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. The hallway was dim when I left rehearsal. The soft glow of late afternoon filtered through the high windows, casting streaks of gold across the linoleum floor. I walked past the bulletin board with my name still absent, past the echo of voices rehearsing lines that once belonged to me. Everything felt quieter, like the building itself was holding its breath. I didn't head home. Instead, I turned toward the nurse's office. It wasn't a dramatic decision. No plan, no theatrics, just a weight inside me that pushed my feet forward, as if my body knew what needed to happen before my mind caught up. When I arrived, Nurse Maribel looked up from her desk. She was reviewing folders, her glasses perched low on her nose. Her expression softened when she saw me. "Sky," she said gently, "you're just in time. We've got your follow-up scheduled today." I nodded. My throat was tight. She gestured to the cot in the corner of the room. I sat down slowly, pulling my hoodie back, revealing the gauze that still covered my cheek and temple. The fabric itched from sweat and time. I hadn't changed it since that morning. Maribel washed her hands, pulled on gloves, and walked over with practiced calm. She reached for the edge of the bandage, pausing for a moment. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded again, this time with a little more air in my lungs. As she peeled the tape gently, layer by layer, as the bandage came away, I could feel cool air hitting raw skin beneath. Her hand paused. I looked at her face. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at my cheek, staring long enough that the silence felt like thunder between us. Her voice was lower when she spoke. "Sky, these aren't accidental." The words didn't surprise me, but hearing them, out loud, from someone who wasn't part of the house I lived in, it was like a dam cracked. She reached for a clean pad and dabbed lightly around the area, careful not to touch the burn directly. Then she stood up, walked to her desk, and pulled out a form. "I have to report this," she said. "You understand that, right?" I didn't hesitate. "Please," I whispered. She looked up, eyes sharp and kind at once. She nodded, reached for the phone, and began dialing. I sat there, not moving, barely breathing, as she spoke in her low, steady tone to someone on the other end. I didn't need to hear the words. I knew who she was calling: Child Protective Services, mandatory reporting, burn patterns inconsistent with self-infliction. And just like that, everything started. Within 45 minutes, 2 officers arrived at the school. They didn't come with sirens or uniforms. They wore plain clothes, one woman in a navy blazer, one man with a quiet presence. They checked in with the front office. I could see the ripple move through the building from my spot at the end of the hallway, like a pebble dropped into still water. The woman, Detective Bennett, came into the nurse's office and introduced herself. She sat beside me while Maribel stayed at her desk, filing things but clearly listening. "We've received a report," Bennett said. "We'd like to ask you some questions." I nodded, hands folded in my lap. She was kind, careful. She didn't ask me to relive the burn, just asked how it happened, when, who was there. I told her about the night. The curling iron, the sound it made, how Isolde just stood there, unmoved. Bennett's jaw clenched slightly. She wrote it all down, then looked up. "Thank you, Skye. You did the right thing coming in." By the time the bell rang for final period, the detectives had moved to the main office. The whispers started immediately, groups of students standing around lockers, glancing toward the front entrance. I stayed tucked in the corner of the nurse's office until Bennett told me I could go. But I didn't go home. Instead, I walked toward the auditorium. Inside, rehearsal was in full swing. Isolde stood at center stage, singing the high note in her solo. Her voice filled the space, as perfect as always, crisp and bright. Miss Martin stood at the back of the auditorium, arms folded, nodding along. I stayed behind the doors, watching through the small window. Then the main doors opened again. The detectives entered. Everyone noticed immediately. The piano stopped. Isolde's voice trailed off mid-sentence. A few cast members whispered. Miss Martin straightened, confused, then alarmed. Detective Bennett stepped forward, addressed the group calmly. "Sorry to interrupt. We're looking for Vera Marlowe and Isolde Marlowe." There was a beat of silence. Then Isolde stepped off the stage slowly. Her face paled. From behind me, I heard the sharp click of heels. Vera had arrived. She pushed past me without a word, marching straight to the front. "Officers," she said smoothly, "I'd appreciate it if you contacted us through legal channels. This is a school. These are children." Bennett didn't flinch. She reached into her bag, pulled out 2 envelopes, and handed one to Vera. "This is a formal summons. We'll be following up within 48 hours. Please have representation available." The other detective handed Isolde a separate envelope. Students began whispering. A few pulled out their phones, but Miss Martin barked out, "No filming!" "Put those away!" Vera turned toward me then, her eyes sharp, mouth tight. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Her glare said it all. "You broke the rules. You brought this on us." But I didn't flinch. I didn't run. I stood tall in the back of the auditorium, just watching. Because this time, they were the ones exposed. When the detectives left, rehearsal broke early. Isolde disappeared into the dressing rooms, Vera trailing behind her. I stayed seated in the back row, the stillness of the room settling around me. My heart was beating, but not fast, just steady. Maribel walked in quietly. She crossed the auditorium and sat beside me without a word. After a moment, she said, "You were right to wait." I looked at her. She didn't smile, neither did I. But I breathed. Finally, for once, I didn't have to explain. I didn't have to defend. For once, the truth was louder than their performance, and it wasn't my voice saying it. The final curtain call of rehearsal week ended just before sunset. As students filtered out of the auditorium, chatting about costumes, cues, and cast party plans, I stayed behind, tucked into the shadows near stage left, where the scent of old velvet and pine from last month's Christmas set still lingered in the air. I wasn't there to perform, not anymore. But I wasn't there to disappear either. Opening night was less than 24 hours away. I didn't rehearse. I didn't need to. I already knew every line, every cue, every lighting change. I knew because I had lived them, until I was erased from the role I earned. But now, I was playing a different part, one with more gravity than applause. Later that evening, I sat cross-legged in the hallway outside the dressing rooms, headphones in, eyes closed, letting the score play through one last time. I could hear Isolde's voice in the background, rehearsing scales behind the thick wall. She was still chasing perfection, even now. Her notes were flawless, but I heard the strain in her breath, The small break in her voice she probably blamed on dust or allergies. But I knew better. She was nervous. Because she knew the spotlight didn't belong to her anymore. Not truly. Friday arrived like a held breath. The building buzzed all morning. Teachers smiled more. The principal gave his usual, "Let's make this a night to remember" speech on the morning announcements. Parents and donors were expected. The superintendent, too. Maybe even a local news team. The show started at 7 p.m. By 6 I was sitting backstage, not in costume, but in black jeans and a soft blue sweater. I'd told Miss Martin I was there to help with transitions and crew traffic. She accepted that answer quickly. Too quickly, like she didn't want to admit she was relieved I wasn't making waves. But I had no intention of staying invisible. Through the gaps in the side curtains, I watched the audience fill in row by row. Maribel arrived early and took a seat in the front. Her posture was still focused. She didn't look for me. But I knew she was there for more than the performance. I scanned the crowd. Alaric was seated near the aisle. Vera, next to him, crossed her legs and adjusted her scarf 3 times before the lights dimmed. No sign of Isolda's friends. Odd. The music began. Isolda entered stage right, cloaked in the deep red costume meant for Christine. The audience clapped politely. Her voice rang out across the theater with confidence, but I saw the tremble in her hands when she lifted them toward the phantom during her solo. She was hitting the notes, but something wasn't connecting. The warmth, the vulnerability, it wasn't there. Halfway through the second act, a missed entrance caused a ripple backstage. The soundboard operator fumbled to cover the silence with an early music cue. Isolda recovered quickly, but the moment passed awkwardly. Her pacing quickened. She sang louder than necessary. Desperation seeped through the seams of the role she'd stolen. Then, during the final number, I walked toward the edge of the wings, stopping just short of the curtain line. From where I stood, the stage lights created a halo around the scene. My body was half-shadowed, invisible to the audience. But in that moment, I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt grounded. I watched her hit the final note and turned to bow. And just as the applause began, light, polite, nothing like she expected, I stepped forward, not onto the stage, just enough that the house lights caught me, briefly. A few gasps. Vera turned her head sharply. Alaric leaned forward. And then, Maribel stood and clapped, once, twice, then again. The rest of the audience hesitated, unsure. Some followed her lead, some didn't. But in that moment, I wasn't the one trying to be seen. I already was. After the show, I stayed behind as the rest of the cast celebrated in the hallway, trading flowers and selfies. Isolda exited the stage door with a fixed smile, cheeks flushed, mascara just beginning to run at the corners. She avoided my eyes as she passed. No words. I waited until most of the crowd had gone before heading toward the main office where the flowers were being sorted for the cast. One bouquet sat apart, roses, lavender wrapping, a gold card. To Annabelle, "You were magnificent. Love, Mom." I stared at the card for a full 10 seconds before lifting it gently. Annabelle was Isolda's middle name. I didn't cry. I didn't even sigh. Instead, I walked it over to the nearest trash bin and dropped it in. On my way out of the building, I handed the bouquet to the janitor near the entrance. "Would you like these?" I asked. He looked surprised. Sure." I smiled politely. They weren't meant for me. Outside, the night air was crisp. Spring had finally started to take root. The sky above the auditorium was deep indigo, and I could hear the muffled cheers from the cast party spilling out from the cafeteria wing. But I wasn't heading there. As I walked across the lot, my phone buzzed. A text from Maribel. "You stood taller than anyone on that stage." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I typed slowly, carefully. "If they can't say my name, they don't get to write my story." Then I put the phone in my pocket and kept walking, one step at a time, away from the theater, away from the noise, toward whatever came next. The stage was done, but my life, my real life, was just beginning. 3 days after the final curtain call, I packed my bags quietly while the rest of the house slept. It wasn't dramatic. No yelling, no slammed doors, no last-minute arguments. I simply folded my clothes, tucked my journal between two sweaters, and slipped the letter Isolde wrote years ago into my back pocket. Celestine, my grandmother, met me at the curb in her old Buick. She didn't say much when I climbed in, just leaned over, kissed the top of my head, and said, "We've got fresh biscuits and honey waiting at the house. You hungry, baby?" I was starving, but not just for food. Her home sat on the outskirts of town, past the rows of identical subdivisions and into the quiet where properties were spaced out and porches still had rocking chairs. When we pulled into her gravel driveway, the wind chimes hanging from the eaves greeted us like old friends. Their gentle music stirred something in my chest that had been locked away for too long. Inside, the smell of cinnamon and something buttery greeted me before the door had even closed behind us. The kitchen light was warm, the table already set for two. A teapot hissed quietly on the stove. Celestine didn't pepper me with questions. She didn't ask for explanations or make me relive anything. She simply set down a plate, poured a cup of tea, and said, "You're safe now, and you don't owe anyone anything, not even answers." That night, after dinner, I pulled out my old journal. Not the one I used to fake gratitude or track school projects, the one I kept hidden, half filled with entries I'd started but never finished. I opened to a blank page and wrote, "Today, I came home." Days passed gently. My bruises faded. My mind cleared. The silence wasn't oppressive here, it was healing. Celestine would hum old gospel songs while folding laundry. We'd take walks in the early evening, just past dusk, when the world turned blue and quiet and forgiving. One morning, I woke up with a sentence echoing in my head. The bandage wasn't just over the wound, it was over the truth. That line stayed with me all day, lingering through breakfast, following me while I read on the back porch, whispering in my ear while I helped Celestine prune the rose bushes. That evening, I opened my laptop and began writing. The bandage became a one-act play, simple in form, but full in weight. It followed a girl who was hurt in the place she was supposed to feel safest. Each scene peeled back a layer, not just of her injury, but of the silence that followed it, the faces that looked away, the people who said, "You're exaggerating," or worse, "Don't make this a big deal." Miss Carter, my former English teacher, and now my quiet lifeline, offered to help me stage it at the local community theater. She read the script in one sitting, called me afterward, and said, "This isn't just a play, Sky. This is you reclaiming your voice." We started auditions the next week. I didn't cast Isolde types. I cast kids who'd always been pushed to the background, the ones who never got solos, who ate lunch alone, who flinched when someone raised their voice. They came alive on stage in ways I never expected. One girl sobbed during a monologue, not because she forgot her lines, but because they hit too close to her own life. Opening night came quickly. I wore black slacks and a blue blouse, the same color as the sweater I wore the night I watched Isolde perform from the wings. Miss Carter stood backstage with me before the doors opened, her hand on my shoulder. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded. I think I've been ready for a long time. The audience was quiet that night. Not the kind of silence that waits for a performance to begin, but the kind that comes when people know something real is about to unfold. Halfway through the second scene, I stepped into the aisle, just to observe from a different angle. That's when I saw them, Vera and Isolde, standing outside the lobby window, just far enough to see the stage, but not allowed inside. Celestine had made sure of that. "We have the right to deny entry to anyone who made her bleed," she'd said plainly to the box office staff that afternoon. Security approached them gently. They didn't argue, they just watched. I didn't flinch, I didn't hide, and I didn't wave. Because they didn't belong in my story anymore. The play ended with a standing ovation. Not thunderous, not overwhelming, but respectful. Moved. Sincere. Maribel stood first. Miss Carter followed, then the rest. Afterward, backstage, one of the younger cast members hugged me and whispered, "I didn't know someone could write about stuff like this." I smiled. We can write about anything, especially the things we're told to forget. Later that night, back at Celestine's, I stood at the kitchen sink washing a teacup when she came in. You were something else tonight, she said. I turned, drying my hands. Thanks. She walked over, held my chin gently between her fingers. Your mama may not see it yet, but I do. You're rewriting the name they tried to take. I nodded, eyes stinging. Before bed, I added one final line to my journal. Some scars don't fade, but they can be the start of something beautiful, if you stop covering them. Some scars you see, others you carry in silence, but neither should be hidden forever. Sky's story reminds us that protecting an image should never come before protecting a child. Have you ever been told to stay silent for the sake of family? What would you do if speaking out meant finally being seen? If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. There's more truth and more strength waiting in the next one. Hi, I'm Deborah. My parents threw my suitcase on the front lawn and screamed, "Leave the keys and go!" That same afternoon, the bank called me the legal owner of the house. And a week later, those same parents who erased me from the dinner table, who told neighbors I'd lost my mind, came back, asking if they could stay. But it wasn't just the eviction that broke me, it was the years of fake concern. The paperwork I signed when I still trusted them. The voice message I was never supposed to hear. What kind of family plans your erasure in advance, while smiling at your birthday? And if they could steal my home, what else were they willing to take? It was late October in Fort Collins, the kind of morning that carried more silence than chill. The sky hadn't quite decided if it wanted to be gray or blue, and the air had that heavy feel, like a conversation waiting to turn uncomfortable. I had been up since 5. I wiped down the counters again, even though I'd already cleaned them twice the night before. I aligned the napkins just right, folded the way Mom used to show me when we had Sunday dinners as a kid. It had been a long time since I set a table for them, but I still remembered which side the fork went on. It wasn't about the meal. It wasn't even about the house. It was about them seeing me, maybe for the first time, without trying to change the lens. By 10, I'd lit the last candle on the console table and smoothed the throw pillows one more time. I stood in the kitchen, hands resting on the edge of the counter, telling myself, they'll see it. They'll see me. They pulled up right before noon. I saw their car from the kitchen window. Same dull gold SUV, same sticker from the church they hadn't attended in years. I adjusted my sweater, took a breath, then another, but they didn't knock. Instead, I heard the slam of a car door, then another. By the time I got to the front door, Mom was already halfway up the steps, dragging my old green suitcase, the one I took to college. I stepped out, still holding the towel I'd used to wipe the glasses. She didn't say hello, didn't even look at me. "Leave the keys, Deborah," she said, not yelling, but loud enough for the neighbor 2 lawns over to glance up from her garden clippers. What? The word barely formed in my throat. Dad walked past me like I wasn't even there. He didn't meet my eyes. He headed straight to the porch table and looked at the key ring I'd left beside the candles. "It was never yours," Mom said, as if she were finishing a sentence I hadn't heard the first part of. She dropped the suitcase, hard. The zipper slid open, revealing my work flats and a stack of folders I kept in my home office. A piece of lined paper fluttered out onto the steps. She didn't pick it up. "Wait, what are you doing?" My voice cracked, but I didn't raise it. I couldn't. "You're not stable enough to manage this kind of responsibility," Dad finally spoke. "We've decided. This house, this family home, is going back under our care." I stood still, not frozen, just locked in place. Neighbors were watching now, not openly, not rudely, but enough glances to know the scene had an audience. "You told people I could stay here," I managed to say. Mom turned, slow and deliberate. That was before you started shutting us out, before you decided you didn't need family. My stomach tightened. I felt the heat rise to my ears, but I stayed quiet. I knelt down, gathered the folder and the shoe that had fallen out. My fingers trembled. The paper had a faint coffee stain in the corner. They didn't yell again. They didn't have to. The message was clear. I picked up the house keys, ones I had polished that morning because for a split second I thought today might matter, and set them on the porch beside the lantern. Dad didn't even glance at me. Mom turned her back before I stood. As I walked toward my car, I heard her voice, quiet but perfectly audible. We gave her everything. She just couldn't handle it. So sad, really. I didn't flinch. I didn't spin around with a speech. I just opened my door, tossed the suitcase in the back, and sat down behind the wheel. A dog barked in the distance. A truck passed slowly. I looked in the rearview mirror, not at the house but at myself. No tears came. No shaking. Just that throb behind my eyes and the tight coil in my chest that had been there since I was 12. Maybe I was never meant to belong here. Maybe I was always just a placeholder until they decided who really deserved to take up space. I started the engine. The house sat behind me like a sealed envelope, and I drove, unsure where to go. Just forward, just away. I didn't scream, I didn't beg. I just drove. But the phone call waiting for me an hour later, it changed everything. I'd been driving for maybe 20 minutes when I realized I hadn't chosen a direction, just avoided home. Not that it was mine anymore, not in the way it should have been. I ended up pulling into a gas station near the edge of town, the kind of place with flickering lights and stale coffee, a place no one asked questions. The moment I killed the engine, my phone lit up on the passenger seat. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. But something in me knew this wasn't a telemarketer. Hello? I answered, my voice flatter than usual. Hi, is this Ms. Deborah Whitmore? The voice on the other end was cheery, too cheery. This is Alexis from Midwestern Mortgage. I hope I didn't catch you at a bad time. That phrase, not how are you, not is everything all right, just I hope I didn't inconvenience you. I swallowed the laugh that almost escaped. What's this regarding? There's been a recent attempt to make changes to your mortgage account, she said. We wanted to confirm before anything proceeded. My fingers tightened around the phone. What kind of changes? Well, there was a request to add co-owners to your deed and to change your mailing address, but the form was incomplete, and it didn't come through our secure portal. We flagged it as suspicious. I stared at the windshield, at the gas pump flickering under a buzzing light. I didn't authorize any changes, I said. That's what we thought. You're still the sole owner on record, and no other party has access or authority. We've locked your file for now, just to be safe. Would you like us to email confirmation? Yes, I said, almost before she finished. Send everything, every request, every flag, all of it. Of course, I'm sorry you had to deal with this. I ended the call, then sat in silence. Not the kind of silence that comes with shock, but the kind that arrives when you realize something. They didn't just kick me out. They tried to erase me, quietly, strategically, legally. I booked a motel room 2 exits down the highway. Nothing fancy. Floral curtains, a humming mini fridge, and that smell of industrial cleaner that never quite fades. It was past dusk now. My phone was at 8% and still buzzing. I turned it over, a text from Mom. We didn't mean it like that. You're still our daughter. Can we talk? My chest tightened, not from sadness, but from the sheer audacity. Then, 2 minutes later, another. We can't stay in our place much longer. We thought, maybe we could stay at yours, just for now. At mine, the house they threw me out of, the one they tried to steal on paper, the one I scrubbed every corner of while imagining a family dinner that would finally feel like a homecoming. I dropped the phone onto the bedspread. The room buzzed with the quiet hum of the AC unit cycling on. I didn't reply. An hour later, I checked my voicemail. There was a new one from Mom. I hesitated, then hit play. Her voice was softer now, rehearsed. "We know you've got space. Ryan's been looking at the basement, to fix it up. We wouldn't be a bother. And you always wanted to be needed, Deborah." Needed. That was the word she reached for. Not loved, not missed, needed. Like a spare key, like a tool. I played the message twice, not because I didn't hear it, but because I needed the reminder. This wasn't grief. This wasn't a rift caused by misunderstanding. This was calculation. I sat down on the floor, my back against the foot of the bed. I didn't cry. Instead, I pulled my laptop out from my bag, plugged it in, let it boot. One by one, I opened the folders, digital copies of my mortgage documents, title deeds, purchase confirmations. I created a new one. Legal, Deborah, primary. Inside it, I started dragging everything I'd need. Deed file, check. Purchase proof, check. Scanned ID, check. Every email, every note, every line that bore my name, not theirs. I didn't slam a door. I didn't raise a voice. But I was done waiting for someone to let me back in. They didn't evict me from a home. They declared war on my right to belong. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They had already moved in. That thought sat heavy on my chest as I idled across the street from my own house, watching someone else's curtains flutter in the living room window. Pale blue, not mine. I used to hang cream ones with a soft pattern, ones I picked with care, lining them myself because I couldn't find the right length. Now they were gone, like I never touched the space at all. A sedan I didn't recognize sat in the driveway. There was a baby sunshade in the back window and a coffee cup on the dash. The blinds in the bedroom I once called mine were pulled all the way down, even though the sun had barely risen. And I didn't get out right away. I sat with the engine running, heart not racing, but aware, very aware. After 10 minutes, I stepped out. The cold hit harder than I remembered. I crossed the street slowly. No one answered the door when I knocked. Just as I turned to leave, the door opened behind me. "You're Deborah?" the woman asked. She couldn't have been more than 25. Blonde ponytail, oversized hoodie. She looked down at her phone, then back up at me, unimpressed. "They said you weren't coming back." "They?" I asked, not moving. "Mara and Vernon, your parents." I didn't say anything, didn't ask why they were telling strangers I'd vanished. "They said you had some stuff to pick up but wouldn't stay, that the place overwhelmed you." I looked past her into the hallway. The walls were still beige, but the pictures were different. No trace of the gallery I once built. Snapshots from travel, one of me standing beside the "sold" sign in the front yard. I thanked her, turned, and walked back down the steps. Before I reached the curb, she called after me. "Oh, there's a letter for you on the porch table. They asked me to leave it out." I didn't answer, just turned, picked it up, and walked away. In my car, I opened it. The envelope said, "Deborah," in my mother's looping cursive. Inside was a single sheet of stationery from the old family desk. Family decisions are complicated. We all have to make sacrifices sometimes. I hope in time you understand we acted out of love. This house has always belonged to all of us. No apology, no ownership, just justification. I drove to the park across from the post office, parked, and got out. There was a trash can next to the bench. I lit the corner of the letter with a match I found in the glove box and let it burn. No theatrics. Just watched until the flame reached my fingers and I dropped it, the ash dissolving before it even landed. Later that afternoon, I drove to Callan's. He was out of town, but I still had a spare key, one of the only people I trusted with that. He always said, "Keys mean nothing if you're not welcome," and he'd never needed to say it twice. Inside, I dropped my bag by the couch and wandered into the guest room. The light was soft, the kind that makes you think maybe nothing's urgent. I pulled out a bin of old files I'd brought when I left home after college, a box I hadn't touched in years. It was mostly tax returns and school papers, but near the bottom, beneath an envelope of baby pictures, I saw it. A cream envelope, no stamp, no address, just my name in thick handwriting, Grandma's. I hadn't seen her handwriting since the funeral. I sat down slowly, holding it like it might shatter. The flap wasn't sealed. Inside was a folded note on yellowed paper. "If you ever feel like they've forgotten you, remember this. You were never invisible to me. This home you've built is yours, Deborah. You don't owe anyone your peace. You don't have to stay small to make others comfortable." I didn't cry right away. It came soft, just a warm blur in my vision, like the body finally catching up with what the heart already knew. That night, I made tea and sat on the floor with my laptop. I created a new folder called Deborah vs. Family, Evidence. Inside went PDFs of the deed, mortgage statements, every screenshot I had of conversations that showed I lived there, paid for everything, maintained the place alone. They had tried to replace me, but now I wasn't just reclaiming the house. I was reclaiming the version of me they'd tried to rewrite. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about clarity. I wasn't just going to get my house back. I was going to get the whole story back, too. The deeper I looked into their lies, the clearer it became. They didn't want me removed from the house. They wanted me removed from the story altogether. But that realization didn't come all at once. It crept in slowly, like rot behind a perfect coat of paint. And it started, really, with that dinner, 2 months ago. I'd spent an entire weekend preparing, scrubbing baseboards, organizing the silverware drawer like Mom used to, placing name cards on the table. I'd even brought out the china set I inherited from Grandma. I had to wipe off dust from plates no one had touched in over a decade. I thought that maybe, just maybe, a real meal in the home I'd built would show them, not to impress, but to belong. The evening sunlight filtered through the blinds when they arrived. Vera walked in first, as usual, adjusting her scarf and making no comment on the soft jazz I'd put on or the smell of roasted chicken filling the air. Isolde followed, wearing those pointed-toe boots she only wore when she wanted to be seen. She glanced at the table and gave a tight smile like she'd walked into a showroom instead of her sister's home. Vernon stepped in last, looking around with eyes that didn't see detail, just ownership. He nodded once and mumbled, "Nice space." Then, "Feels a bit big for one person." I smiled, tight-lipped. "It's manageable." They sat down without waiting to be invited. We made it through the salad mostly in silence. Every so often, someone would shift the salt shaker or readjust their napkin, but no one asked me about work or the promotion I'd gotten 2 weeks prior or the artwork on the wall that I'd painted myself. When I brought out the main course, Isolde tilted her head and said, "You don't really decorate like someone who plans to stay, do you?" It stung more than it should have. Vera chuckled lightly. She always liked temporary things. Remember when she painted her room black in high school? I didn't reply. I just returned to the kitchen, pretending to check on the bread that didn't need checking. When I came back, Vernon was folding his napkin neatly beside his untouched glass. Well, he said, standing, we should let you rest. It's a lot of house to manage after all. And just like that, they left. No compliments, no thank yous, only silence and the soft echo of the door clicking shut behind them. I stood at the table long after they were gone. Not because I didn't know what to do next, but because I wasn't sure it had even happened. It felt like a performance I'd staged for ghosts. Now, weeks later, standing at the edge of my backyard, I remembered that evening with painful clarity. The dinner wasn't an attempt to reconnect. It was a warning. I stayed hidden in the alleyway behind the house, keeping to the shadows. The new tenants, or squatters, depending on how I decided to frame them legally, were inside. I could hear faint laughter from the kitchen window. I moved around back to the small garden plot I'd created the summer after Grandma passed. I had planted a rose bush there, a specific shade of soft coral that reminded me of the lipstick she always wore. She'd told me once it was her favorite flower, and every year since, it bloomed right before her birthday, except now it was gone. In its place stood a plastic bird bath surrounded by white gravel. The soil had been dug out completely, no trace of the bush. No root, no tag, no memory. They didn't even bother to cover the rawness of the spot. It was as if nothing meaningful had ever existed there. I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture, titled the file, "They Erase Everything," and sent it to myself. I didn't cry. I didn't even fume. I simply stood there, cataloging the loss, like a museum archivist preserving what little history remained before it was whitewashed entirely. This wasn't about space. It never had been. It was about control. Who controlled the version of reality we all agreed to accept? And in their version, I had no place, no roots, no rosebush. I turned away and headed back to the car. The wind picked up just enough to make the back gate creak behind me. They didn't want dinner. They wanted to remind me who they thought still owned the house. The next morning, I pulled into the driveway just after 8. The autumn air was sharp, carrying a kind of quiet that didn't feel peaceful, just empty. My hand reached for the familiar ring of keys, still clipped to the side of my bag. I tried not to think about the last time I used them. I stepped up to the door, slid the key into the lock, and twisted. Nothing. I tried again, jiggled it. Pulled the door toward me, like that would make a difference. Still nothing. I looked down. The welcome mat was different. Brighter, with a scripted, "Home is where the heart is," embroidered across it in cursive. It wasn't mine. Neither was the new planter with fake succulents hanging beside it. I rang the doorbell. A moment later, footsteps. Then the door opened. A young woman I didn't recognize blinked at me through the screen. "You're Deborah?" she asked, already sounding bored. "Yes." She shifted her weight, glanced down at her phone, then looked back at me. "They told me you weren't coming back, that you moved out, for your mental health." There it was again, that phrase. "They?" "Vera and Vernon," she said. "Your folks." I stepped back, not because I was afraid, but because I didn't want to say what I really felt. That I wanted to push the door wide open, walk past her, and reclaim what was already mine. Instead, I nodded once, turned, and walked away without saying another word. I didn't go home, because apparently I couldn't. Instead, I went to Callan's, let myself in with the spare key, sat on the edge of his kitchen counter with a coffee I didn't drink. That afternoon, I started digging through old emails. I was looking for anything, maybe a bank notice I missed, maybe a message from Isolde pretending to check in, but really checking my location. What I found was worse. It was a screenshot, accidentally included in a forwarded chain from our aunt, titled "Family Forever." A group chat. I wasn't in it, but Vera, Isolde, Ryan, and their attorney were. The most recent message was from 3 weeks ago. She leaves for work by 8:10, move in midweek, followed by, she never locks the back door. We're fine. My throat tightened. I scrolled further. A picture of my living room, my rug, my couch. Only now, there were new throw pillows, a baby swing, and someone else's boots by the door. They hadn't just taken the space. They'd practiced, planned. I closed the laptop, breathing slow, calculated breaths. An hour later, I called my mother. She answered on the third ring. "Deborah," she said, voice flat. "You moved in without my permission," I said. My tone wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either. "We were always going to. This house was never meant for just one person, honey. You know that. It belongs to the family." "You mean to you," I corrected. A pause, then, "We were worried about you. You've always been impulsive." "No," I said firmly. "I've always been clear. You just never liked hearing it." I didn't yell. I didn't plead. I just said what needed to be said. "This is your final warning," I told her. "The next message will come from a lawyer." Then I hung up. That evening, I walked into the FedEx store off Lincoln Avenue. The girl behind the counter didn't even blink when I asked to print 30 pages of legal documents. I handed her a flash drive, watched her open each file: title deed, mortgage contract, notarized payment records. Callan met me outside 10 minutes later, coffee in one hand, his expression steady. "I need a witness," I told him. "For what?" I handed him the envelope. "To watch me take back what's mine, officially." He didn't ask more, just nodded. They took the house like it was a family heirloom. They forgot the deed had my name on it. By Thursday morning, I was back at the motel. The little window unit rattled in the corner, trying to pretend it was enough for the whole room. I sat on the bed, legs crossed, laptop open. My coffee had gone cold, but I hadn't touched it in 20 minutes. I was staring at my credit report. 2 new accounts, one at a department store I hadn't stepped foot in since college. The other, a personal loan from a lender based in Oregon. Both opened in my name, both using my social security number. But the listed address wasn't mine anymore. It was the house, my house. I clicked on the application details. Email contact, IsoldeWhitmoreFamily@gmail.com. Subtle as a billboard. I leaned back, heart beating not with fear, but with clarity. I remembered the conversation with Mom 2 years ago. "You should send over your social for the accountant," she had said over brunch. "He needs it for something tax-related, just to cross-check." We're trying to simplify everything for the family trust. And like a fool, I had sent it. A scanned copy, clean and official, right from my work printer. Dad had followed up the next day, asking for a recent W-2 to make sure your records match ours. I didn't even question it. That's the thing with betrayal. It never walks in with a sign. It comes wearing the old familiar jacket of someone you trusted. That afternoon, I stopped by Callan's place to pick up some mail he'd been holding for me. We talked briefly in his driveway, sun just beginning to lower behind the trees. "You all right?" he asked, handing me a manila envelope. "No," I said, "but I'm getting clear." He nodded, sensing I wasn't there for small talk. Inside the envelope was something I didn't expect, a USB drive. "There's something on that you should hear," he said. "It came from someone who used to do business with your dad." Apparently, he recorded more than just numbers. I took it back to the motel and plugged it into my laptop. It took a minute to load. The audio was scratchy, like it had been pulled from a meeting held in a basement somewhere, but the voice, unmistakable. "Vernon, my father." "If she pushes back, that's fine," his voice crackled. "Once she's out, change the locks. shift everything gradually. She'll call a lawyer, but by then, the narrative is ours." Silence followed, and then a faint chuckle. Not his, but someone else's. A woman's, likely Isolda's. "She'll cry first, then she'll fold." I sat still, hands resting flat on the table. I didn't replay it out of disbelief. I replayed it to make sure every syllable was captured, every syllable I would need in court. That evening, I composed an email to my attorney. The subject line was short: criminal intent, documented. I attached 3 files: the audio, a PDF of the credit report, and a zipped folder titled Past Correspondence, SSN W2. In the body, I typed only one sentence: "They've crossed a line I can't ignore. Let's escalate." I clicked send. Then I closed the laptop and let myself exhale, long and slow. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't hurt. I was focused. For the first time, the chaos felt like evidence. The manipulation was becoming measurable, quantifiable. They'd expected me to scream. I'd rather file. That night, I pulled out a legal pad and began drafting a witness statement. Not to send right away, but to prepare. It wasn't theatrical, it was factual. Dates, accounts, conversations, timeline, intent. I included everything: the dinner, the key no longer fitting, the credit theft, the voice recording, the family group chat I had never been invited to. I noted how they referred to me in emails: the unstable one, the burden, the temporary problem. They used my name to break me. I'll use the truth to end them. It had rained the night before. The alley behind the house was still damp, the pavement darkened with leftover puddles and fallen leaves stuck in clumps along the fence line. I parked a block over, walking with a purposeful quietness toward the back gate, the same gate I had once painted white by hand. Now the paint was chipped and the latch hung crooked. I wasn't there to reclaim anything, not yet. I just needed to retrieve an old file cabinet I'd stored in the detached shed. I had tucked it behind tarps months ago, thinking I'd return for it when the timing felt less radioactive. As I moved past the trash bins stacked beside the fence, something caught my eye. A frame. Wooden. Familiar. I stepped closer, heart already preparing for what my mind hadn't accepted yet. There it was. A photo of me at 10 years old, standing between Mom and Dad in front of our old house, missing a front tooth and beaming like I had no idea how fragile families really were. Across my face, in thick red marker, someone had drawn an X. Not a slip, not a spill, a deliberate cross. Right through me. For a second, I couldn't move. I didn't feel anger first. I felt nausea. Who takes a child's photo and mutilates it like that? I reached down, lifted the frame slowly, and held it under the gray morning light. The glass was cracked in one corner. Dirt smudged the edges, but the X, that was fresh. I took a picture of it with my phone, then slipped the photo out of the frame and slid it into a folder I carried in my bag. Later that afternoon, I was back at Callan's, trying to make sense of where lines between betrayal and pathology blurred. As I organized new files into labeled folders, an email pinged from my attorney. No subject line, just a forwarded audio file. In the message thread below, the receptionist wrote, "Sorry, this got copied to your client by mistake, but it's public record now." I clicked the audio file. It was a voicemail, and I knew the voice instantly. Vera. "She's always had some emotional issues, don't you think?" she said in her syrupy tone. "We just want to make sure the house is in safe hands, especially if something goes wrong. We're not trying to take anything. We just can't watch her spiral again." Spiral. She'd made it sound like I was an unstable tenant in her life story. someone who might accidentally burn the place down. I played it again, 3 times, saved it in a folder labeled Mental Health Fabrication, Exhibit D. Callan came by that evening with takeout and quiet support. "You should file a restraining order," he said without preamble. "This isn't family dynamics anymore, Deb. This is a campaign." He was right. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I opened my laptop, pulled up the county site, and began writing the motion myself. I had done it enough times in my head. Now it just needed formatting. 3 days later, I stood at the courthouse clerk's counter with 2 copies of everything: notarized statements, financial records, the voice recording, the vandalized photo, the voicemail to the doctor, the group chat logs. They hadn't just tried to take my home. They were trying to take the version of me that was sane, capable, stable. I wouldn't let them. As I turned from the clerk's window, I ran directly into Isolde. She was holding a Starbucks cup, all confidence and cream coat. "You're making this dramatic," she said, lifting an eyebrow. "You always did." "No," I said, stepping past her. "I'm making it legal." She laughed under her breath. "You always needed a stage." I didn't answer. Her words were dust by then. That night, I pulled every piece of paper I had and reorganized the folders. I printed duplicates of all digital evidence. I labeled every section as if I were preparing to present to a grand jury. They thought they could delete me. I was making myself unerasable. And then, as if fate needed a final punctuation mark, I opened my inbox just before midnight. There it was. An email from Vera. But it wasn't meant for me. It was meant for her lawyer. Subject line: urgent. Remove Deborah before she files. The message came in at 12:03 a.m. I hadn't been asleep, just lying there in the dark, watching the motel ceiling shift with shadows from the parking lot lights. My laptop chimed quietly from the table across the room. I rolled over and clicked the trackpad without much thought. The subject line hit me like a slap. Urgent. Remove her first. It was from Vera. The body was short. "She's escalating. If she files first, we lose our window. I need you to act now. Keep the story consistent. Mental health, financial instability, whatever sticks. I'll handle Isolde." No greeting, no sign-off, just tactical instructions, like I wasn't her daughter, but a problem to be deleted from a spreadsheet. She'd meant to send it to her attorney. Instead, it came to me. I stared at the screen until the cursor stopped blinking. There was no rush of anger, no gasp, no fists clenched, just a strange, cold certainty, like the moment before a storm hits, but you're already inside the house. At 12:06, I opened my inbox and forwarded the message to my attorney. Subject: it's time. I attached everything: the voicemail to the doctor, the Red X photo, the credit report, the deed, and now, this final nail. By 8:42 a.m., I had a response. "We're filing for a full injunction today. Protective order, emergency hearing. You're covered, Deborah." I exhaled. Finally. An hour later, my phone rang. It was Nancy Mitchell, an old family friend who still volunteered at Mom's church. She didn't say hello. "Deborah, I don't know what's going on, but your mother's name was just removed from the community board. She's not leading the winter donation drive anymore." Pause. Someone leaked an email. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. The war wasn't just legal anymore. It was public. After the call, I opened a new folder on my laptop and titled it Proof of Pattern. Inside, I began cataloging timelines, not just for the judge, for me. That afternoon, I sat in the corner of the courthouse, ankle crossed over my knee, fingers resting quietly on my file folder. Vera entered the courtroom with Isolde trailing her like a nervous PR assistant. Their lawyer walked ahead like he was headed into a boardroom, not a legal confrontation over property and psychological warfare. They sat across from me. Vera didn't look at me directly, but she didn't avoid me either. She wore that same navy blazer she used for funerals. She was trying to appear composed, responsible, motherly. The judge called the hearing to order. My attorney spoke first, submitting the documents in order, Exhibits A through H. When the judge read the subject line of the leaked email aloud, Vera flinched. That was the only moment she cracked. She didn't cry, she didn't defend herself, because now she couldn't. The evidence wasn't about emotion, it was undeniable. At 11:14 a.m., the judge granted the protective order. Vera and Isolde were to vacate the property within 72 hours. They were prohibited from contacting me directly. All communication would go through attorneys until the full trial. No celebratory music played as I walked down the courthouse steps. No reporters, no fist pumps, just a long breath. One I hadn't let myself take since the first insult was wrapped in a soft chuckle at that dinner table months ago. That night, back at the motel, I sat on the bed and looked around. Same rattling air unit, same lamp with the crooked shade. But for the first time, I wasn't bracing for impact. Justice doesn't always feel like a victory lap. Sometimes it's just enough to finally sleep without wondering which lie they'll use next. The house was mine, but the air still smelled like her perfume. By Christmas morning, the house was mine again, not just in paperwork, but in presence. There were no lawyers left to call. No more voicemails from Vera or court notices stuffed into my mailbox. Just me, and this place I had almost surrendered to them, not by force, but by exhaustion. Snow had dusted the roof overnight, and from the kitchen window, the street shimmered in silence. No tire tracks, no kids on bikes, just gray skies and unbroken stillness. I padded across the hardwood floor in wool socks, the wood smooth and cool underfoot. It creaked differently now, not under tension, but in rhythm. There were traces of them that hadn't faded yet. In the closet, I still found one of Isolde's scarves tangled in a drawer. In the hall, a faint trace of my mother's perfume lingered near the light switch, something synthetic and floral, the kind of scent that pretended to be gentle. I didn't rush to scrub them out. Instead, I lit a candle. It had once belonged to Vera, an expensive one she insisted only be lit on meaningful occasions. This morning felt like one, though not in the way she would have defined it. The flame flickered steadily. I didn't look at it like a symbol. I didn't need symbolism anymore. I just needed warmth. By noon, I was standing in the living room with a hammer and nail. I had a photo in hand, not of them, not of us. It was a picture of me, alone, at 30, standing in front of this very house the day I closed on it. My smile was uneven, my eyes tired but proud. I hung it above the mantel. Next, I went outside, clipped away the plastic sculpture they'd placed where my grandmother's rosebush used to be, and planted fresh lavender. The soil was cold, but the motion soothed something in me. I whispered her name under my breath as I covered the roots. Inside, I emptied the drawer that used to be filled with legal threats and now filled it with something mundane: paint samples, fabric swatches, coupons for curtain rods. I liked the ordinariness of it, proof that life could be rebuilt with small, boring choices. That afternoon, a letter arrived. Handwritten. No return address, but the envelope gave it away. I opened it at the kitchen table, hands steady. "I shouldn't have let it get this far," it began. "I was trying to protect what I built. I didn't realize how much of it was yours." No apology, no ownership, just enough distance to pretend it had all been unfortunate misunderstandings. It was the kind of message meant to reset a narrative, not repair a wound. I folded it once and placed it in a drawer I labeled, "For record, not emotion." I said out loud, to no one, "Some doors don't need to be slammed. They just don't need to be opened again. The next morning, I hosted brunch. Callan came early, bringing a warm tray of cinnamon rolls. My neighbor across the street stopped by with cranberry muffins. Nora, the woman who'd once watched my mother humiliate me from her front porch without saying a word, came too, this time carrying a bottle of wine and an apology tucked into her eyes. The house filled with the sound of small talk, laughter, silverware clinking on plates. I didn't lead every conversation. I didn't have to. I was just there, present, still, whole. As people left, they hugged longer than usual. They lingered at the door, thanking me in tones that meant more than just politeness. They weren't sorry for what had happened, but they were glad I was still standing. By dusk, the house was quiet again. I washed the last dish by hand, dried it, set it back in the cabinet. Then I stood by the front window, the candle still glowing beside me. I could see my breath faintly against the glass. Sometimes, what we call family is just shared blood. What we call peace is knowing you no longer need to ask them to see you. They tried to take my house, but they couldn't take the woman who built it. Some families don't shatter with a single betrayal. They chip away at you slowly, until one day you realize you've been replaced in your own story. If you've ever been made to feel small to keep someone else comfortable, this story was for you. Have you ever had to fight for something that was already yours? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more true emotional stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe. There's so much more to uncover.